I'm Teresa Au. Welcome to In the Making, where I have conversations with creatives, solopreneurs, and experts that explore the challenges and the rewards of the creator economy. I'm thrilled today to welcome a legend in the design world. Tina Roth Eisenberg, also known as swissmiss, is known to over 500,000 followers as the creator and talent behind the swissmiss design blog. She's the founder of CreativeMornings, a volunteer-driven organization that gathers designers in 240 cities across 67 countries for free talks and community. Tina also created the design-forward temporary tattoo business, Tattly, which she eventually sold to Bic. And this is especially special for me because Tina and I go way back. We worked together at a very small startup back in the day in New York City. Yeah, it seems like a lifetime ago. And it's been years since we chatted, so I'm super excited. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. What a fun way to reconnect, Teresa.
So I talk to creative people all the time. Designers, solopreneurs, content creators. One universal theme that I hear from them all the time is how isolating and how hard it is to work alone as a designer. 15 years ago, you were feeling maybe the same way because you started the first design co-working space in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty different from working as a designer. You were a designer at the time. Mm-hmm. What motivated you to take that on?
So what's so interesting about that moment in my career is that I started running my own design studio in 2006 and worked the first year from home. And then eventually was like, this is not it. I want to be surrounded by other creatives. And then looked for a small white box on the East River in Dumbo and had this vision that if I build it out with desks, people will come. And my criteria was I want to surround myself with other creatives that are in a creative industry in some sort and that are just really kind, loving humans. And I built out this space, not realizing it will be completely changing my life. It was the best thing I've ever done in my entire career because I had developers next to me, copywriters, illustrators, and as spaces opened up next to me, we broke down walls and made the spaces bigger. And in the end, we had all of the rock stars from that time, sort of in the web industry, in that space. For example, Jessica Hish was there, Maria Popova from Brain Pickings, Jason Santa Maria, you name it, they were all part of it. So we grew from what was supposed to be a 6-people space to 65 people. And every day I had the most interesting lunch conversations. People would talk about their projects, what they're working on. And then obviously you would start collaborate with each other. And I started 3 companies out of that space.
Wow. What were the 3 companies?
Well, so having the space, we originally called it Studio Mates, made me realize that the magic that unfolds when you gather with equally creative and kind people in a space on a daily basis. And that created the desire to gather the creative community at large in New York City. And that's why I started CreativeMornings. And the first one, the unofficial first one, was actually in our co-working space. So the CreativeMornings came out of it. Then over lunch conversations, I had the idea to start Tattly. And that was more a joke than anything else, the temporary tattoo company. And I remember even doing the pricing over lunch, going to my friends, at lunch, like, what do you think? 2 tattoos? $5? Does that sound good? I had no idea about margins or the price, the thinking and analyzing that goes into product pricing. It was very adorable. My favorite lunch conversation kickstarting of a company was my to-do app, To-Do.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can think of or start when you're around like-minded people or creative people as well. And you just bounce ideas off of each other. I love that.
And especially with complementing skills, I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Like if you have an idea, but then the other person can take it to a next level with their skills. And if it's playful enough and just fun enough, and you do it without this big expectation of creating a business, it creates so much good energy and momentum that people really feel and get excited about.
So let's talk about Creative Mornings. What were those first meetings like and how did it grow from there? Because it's enormous now, right?
I call it the unofficial first Creative Mornings. Was at our space. The elevator was broken. We're on the 6th floor. The bagels were stale and the coffee was cold, and it was sad. But hey, we had over 50 people in our space and they were eager to hang out and talk to each other. But what I realized is, oh my God, it was awkward. It felt like networking. I think as a designer, or I guess as a creative in general, you have this prototyping mindset, which has helped me so much in life. Because I remember after that first one, I was like, okay, I took note of what was great and what wasn't great. And then I was like, let me chisel away and prototype it and change it up a bit. And then the next time I changed something, and then I changed something again. But I realize now, seeing some of my friends who are starting businesses that are not out of the creative industry, they get very frustrated because it wasn't perfect. And I feel like as a creative type, we love to do this constant improving and chiseling away at it. I feel like the fact that I'm a trained designer and have that mindset has been such an incredible advantage.
I hear that a lot, progress over perfection. That is so encouraging, I think, for the rest of us. For people who are listening who are not designers, this is something they can apply to what they're trying to do is progress over perfection. You got to keep iterating and changing and making it better.
And also seeing it as a playful iteration. To me, all of these things I started, they're play. Wouldn't it be fun? Oh my God, what if? And then sort of with like a little bit of a, oh my God, are we really trying this feeling? And a little bit of giddiness and playfulness. And like, isn't this crazy that we're doing this feeling? I feel like that creates such a lightness around what you're trying to do that also keeps you going. And to be honest, I feel like now that I've had a few successes, it's a little harder to do because the stakes are higher.
Yeah. But I'm sure you still inject fun into everything you do. That's just your DNA. Yeah. I think a lot of people are afraid of playing, but it makes so much sense. There's less pressure in general when you're just starting it out as a playful thing.
I think the biggest hack ever, especially if you're someone who overthinks things, is to call the thing you're trying to do an experiment. We're doing an experiment. It takes all the pressure off.
Just like this podcast, it started as an experiment and a pilot.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. So one of the most exciting things about Creative Mornings is that it's free. It's volunteers and sponsors that make it happen. I am so fascinated. You have to write a business case, if you haven't already, on how to scale that initiative that you did by enlisting volunteers and sponsors. You describe this as radical generosity. What do you mean by that?
So Creative Mornings, and when I talk about it now, I oftentimes, because you're talking to me about the beginning. So I just want to make clear that when I started this out, I wasn't aware of where I'm heading or what I'm about to say right now. To me at the time, I just had the urge to gather the New York City creative community. And as someone who was very lucky to go attend a lot of conferences that were expensive, and I had a very popular blog and I would write about it. And a lot of people would always say, like, I cannot go to this. My company will not send me. I wish I could see Michael B. Root speak. And also when I moved to New York City, I had a job, but I made such little money. I couldn't attend the industry events that were organized by AIGA in New York City. I remember I couldn't afford a $25 event. So to me, there was a real desire to make these completely accessible so nobody would be left out. I never planned on growing this. Again, I was just prototyping, and it was like, what can it cost to, get a venue for 40, 50 people, get a few bagels and coffee? I mean, I was like, yeah, I'll pay for it. I don't care. That's fine. It was never about money. It was about human connection. It was about making friends. Because when I first moved here in 1999 and I didn't know anyone, I was just like, where are my people? So it came from a really innocent place. I just really thrive when I can get people in the room together. I'm a human gatherer at heart. So to me, this was all very organic and very, very easy. And I just loved it. It filled my bucket. Every month there would be maybe 20, 30 people more. And that was really exciting. And agencies started inviting us in. So to me, I was kind of trained to venues are free because we got invited to be at their agency and have the events there.
Yeah.
And so eventually I was like, this is possible. I can keep doing this. Like I sort of set myself up for the expectation that we're going to keep this thing free. You know, and I didn't draw a salary for, I've put 7 years. I never felt like it was right. I always felt like Creative Mornings, what I did, what I put in came back in other ways. So anyway, fast forward 2 years in, I had other people from around the world ask me if they can bring it to their cities. And that was a real moment. Wow, wait, do I want that? Do I want it to grow? How do I trust this person to sort of take it out into the world in the way that I would want it to be taken out into the world? So that was a real moment. One of the first ones to ask me was a friend of mine who has been to many of our events in New York, who went to LA. And my friend John, I trusted him so much. He says, Tina, I know what they have to feel like. I know what the essence is of it. I know what you care about. So it's just so beautiful when you sometimes look back at things you built. Now, 16 years later, we're in 67 countries, and we have created interview systems to figure out if somebody's the right person to be the host in their city. Creative Mornings that's slowly but surely wrapping the world in sort of a network of friendship.
Yeah.
The thing that happens when you are part of our host network, you literally have access to hosts, like people that are like leaders in their creative communities in 240 cities around the world. So I'm going to Lisbon in a week, and I have coffee with someone there who's part of the volunteer team. Then I'm going to Porto. Literally, like you email them and say like, hey, I'm going to be in your city. I'm from the volunteer team in I don't know where. Yeah. And they're excited to meet you. I mean, just imagine how valuable that is.
Yeah. It's like family. It's knowing a friend in that city. Mm-hmm. Creative Mornings has been so successful, and now you're playing with a new idea, a new experiment prototype. Tell us all about that.
The fact that Creative Mornings survived the pandemic is a miracle. Like, we are the world's largest face-to-face creative community. So when the pandemic happened and I was like, oh, wow, this might be the end of it. This might be it. Everything I've built is going away. But then I saw the resilience of our volunteer community and them saying, no. And also the resilience of our community in general. So we then started, of course, like everyone else, gathering virtually and online. And I am so proud because I would have never, ever touched anything digital with a 10-foot pole. I don't believe in it. But we were forced to. And then I was like, well, now we're going to lean in and we're going to make these so good that when people get off our Zooms, they're going to just, their heart is smiling. And we managed to do that. I'm so proud of ourselves. Our Zooms were so energizing and so beautiful. And we really figured it out to the point where companies came to us and says, can you please teach us and our employees how to do this? So I started realizing that our superpower is how to create loving, gentle, kind, safe human connection. And what I've realized is that right now it's kind of throttled. It's once a month. It depends on the host in a city. And I had an epiphany in January. What we need to do is let our community, the people attending our events all over the world, which is about 20,000 a month, we need to let them self-organize. We need to stop being in the way of how often they can meet up. We need to let them self-organize hyper-locally around something they love. And the idea for clubs was born. And we've been prototyping clubs now for 3 months here in New York City. And the response has been incredible. Like, we have, I think, 15 clubs up and running. And basically what makes clubs special is that our community members can, for example, you could send in an application and say, like, I'm Teresa. I want to host a, wherever you live in your neighborhood, silent book reading club every other Wednesday, because that's my jam. And then you have to commit to a certain cadence. And that's the beauty of it. Because what I care about is the depth of connection that we create. When there's a cadence to your commitment, you actually really forge a deeper bond with the people in your community. And especially if it's hyperlocal, you're less likely to bail. And what I didn't realize is that in 2019, I accidentally started a choir. long story, but I'm afraid of singing. I want to be part of a choir. So I realized the only way I can do this if I start the choir and basically tell people I'm scared of singing. I have no business running a choir, but maybe you feel the same way and you really want to be part of a choir. So let's do this. Every other Wednesday we meet up and we sing and rehearse. And we ran it for a year and we performed at 4 Creative Mornings events. So it became sort of
wow.
And now looking back, I realized I was prototyping clubs because I initially was nervous around, can I commit every other Wednesday night? Do I want this? I'm giving up a lot of my personal time, right? Like I remember having these thoughts, but then I realized just what a beautiful community it is and how wonderful it is to just forge deeper connections with people within our community. So that's what we're building right now. I'm friends with Scott Heiferman, who built meetup.com, which is, I think, a beautiful platform. And I remember having lunch with him, 10 years ago or something. And he looked at me and says, Tina, you have a values-aligned community. And I built a tech platform where all kinds of communities meet on. I'm basically putting a meetup layer on top of our community. There's a code of conduct that is within the DNA of our community. People are kind. They show up generously. They show up respectfully. That makes it extremely safe to possibly go to the drawing club, even though you don't think you're really creative. You introduced us as Creative Mornings is for designers, but that's actually not the case. That's how it started. But our manifesto says everyone's creative. We are for anyone who is curious and a creatively minded human. And I am proud of the stories of people that say, I'm a lawyer, but I'm interested in creativity. And they come to our events and they hear our manifesto and they say like, oh my God, you're saying everyone is welcome, and then lean into it. And that, to me, those are the stories that really get me in my heart.
So many of us crave community, but that means showing up for people. It means commitment. Why do you think commitment is so hard for some people, especially these days?
Well, I think we have lost the practice of being in community and spaces and being in loving community. And I feel like spaces like Creative Mornings have created very lightweight and simple rituals that just make you kind of like practice it over and over and get you used to it again. Pete Davis gave a wonderful talk in April here at Creative Mornings. It's about the commitment issue that our society is having right now. And he explains it so beautiful, and I'm probably going to butcher it a bit, but he says that we all kind of got stuck in the hallway of our life. We're all keeping our options open. But what actually happens when you keep your options open, you don't go anywhere. And he researched what he calls the long haulers, the people that commit themselves to a place, to a community, to a cause. And what he's found is that those people are the ones that are the happiest, because there's this deep satisfaction and fulfillment that comes with a commitment, right? And as I said, when I committed to hosting the choir every other Wednesday, I was scared of just giving up my time and having like, what if I want to go to something else? Like, what is my opportunity cost? What if I get invited to a really cool dinner? But I think that's the muscle that we have to practice again and say, like, I stand for this community. I stand to this commitment, and I see the value of being committed to this small, hyper-local community or whatever it is. And I actually see this as part of why Creative Mornings exists.
Your community sounds like a utopia. You know, everyone's kind. How do you foster that kind of environment? And no place is perfect, right? No community. How do you also get rid of the bad apples?
See, the interesting thing is we've had to only eject 2 hosts in 16 years running a chapter because they've gone completely against what they agreed to. Like one chapter was in Brazil and they started charging money for the tickets. That's a breach of our agreement. And another host, unfortunately, was just really rude to women. And then we said, you no longer apply. But that is it. And I have to tell you, there's something to be said when a community starts self-organizing, when the values are so clear and so visible and so palpable. It's almost like, you know, in a relationship, you talk about the thing that you build together. I feel like in a community that is really solid, you feel the third. You protect the third. You're in service of the third, even if you just show up once a month. But that thing is precious. For example, we have an online peer-to-peer learning space, a virtual learning space. It's called Virtual Field Trips, where you can step up and teach something to our community. It's really beautiful. And I am consistently amazed when I'm on them because they're not a webinar. People have their cameras on. People are engaged in the chat. They're friendly. It's warm. It's just really, really kind and loving. And what I love is somebody is disrespectful or rude in any way, which doesn't happen often. People instantly shut it down. We don't even have to do anything. Because the people that are in our community protect the thing that they come here for and that they care for so deeply.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to go back to asking you a follow-up question about the Zoom Creative Mornings that happened during the pandemic. What did you do that was so different that made it so special? Because I'm like you. I like in person. I think it's so flat, when it's virtual, it's hard to read the room, etc.
I'm really lucky that I had so many people on my team back then and still do now that just really get the energy level and the engagement of how you show up and how that pulls you in, right? So for example, our virtual Zoom events were so much more work than our 600-700 people in-person events because we had to script everything through. So for example, from the minute you came on that Zoom, and we had thousands of people come, from the minute you logged on, there was music playing, we were engaging, we were saying hello, we were saying, where are you from? You were just swept up in this energy, in this wave of positivity. You couldn't help but just participate in it and serve it. We also learned there's a certain amount of time they're interested in something, and then you need to switch gears again, right? 10-minute increments, I would say. Or we would also really look at what makes our events special, right? Our in-person events, standing in a coffee line was the place you met people. That's where it was easy to talk to someone. So we created what we called the breakout rooms. And we said, imagine you're standing in line for coffee, and now you're meeting someone in the coffee line. And playful things like this, where we brought the nature of our in-person events back into the Zoom events, et cetera. And we just really learned how to engage the community, that they really felt like they were part of this. It wasn't a webinar. Nobody was talked to in a boring way. And I was really proud of the engagement we got out of them and the feedback we were getting after the events.
Yeah. That's amazing. It just warms my heart to see when people connect. I've seen something on your Instagram that looks like so much fun. What is Neighborhood Coffee Shop?
Yes. So this is one of my latest human gathering experiments. Tim and I were able to purchase a really, really particular old house last December. This is an old house that was disassembled in a different place from the 1830s. And then our now neighbor purchased from this man that disassembled the house and rebuilt it from scratch. So it's an old house in a new location. At the closing, the man who built the house, he says to me, Tina, there's a lot of people in the neighborhood who want to meet you.
What?
I didn't really know what to do with that. And he says, well, I really am ingrained in our community and a lot of neighbors, and they've seen the house go up and they heard about you. I told them about you. He's a very communal man. He's my neighbor now, right? And then I told him, what are we going to do with that? There's a lot of people who want to meet us. And so that resulted in the idea of let's open up our kitchen for our neighbors on a Saturday morning and just pretend it's a coffee shop. And there's coffee flowing from 9 a.m. till noon. It was so beautiful and so lightweight and such a simple invitation that is not daunting. It's not like a sit-down dinner where you commit to 4 hours. I was astounded at how beautiful it felt that we are now doing it monthly. And I have friends who have since tried the same thing, who have lived in their neighborhoods for years and have never met their neighbors, and put handwritten notes in their neighbor mailboxes and said, hey, we're doing this coffee pop-up shop. To me, it's just another testament that people love to be invited. They want to meet their neighbors. They want to be in friendly community. And it's so simple. All you have to do is just kickstart it a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. That's so amazing. Tina, you're a serial entrepreneur. You have a track record of starting things that gets huge. But you also closed your design firm and sold Tatley. So how do you know when it's time to let things go?
That is such a good question. Well, let me tell you that I think my track record of building things that grow and become big have to do with sort of my Swiss upbringing. When I commit to something, I have a hard time uncommitting. Like I just keep going. And I sometimes wish I would be able to release something sooner. Because if I'm really honest, I wanted to sell Tatley many, many years before. Because I could sense that I was outgrowing it. And don't get me wrong, I love Tatley. I'm proud of Tatley. I think it's a beautiful company who brings so much joy to so many people. But I personally was hurting at the end because I didn't belong to it anymore. And I don't know if this makes sense to anyone who has never started a company. For people who have started a company, they probably know that feeling. The one piece of advice I have for people is that if you really pay attention to your body, because I was physically feeling like I don't belong anymore. And I didn't listen to it for many years. I actually deeply admire people that realize when it's time to let go. It's that fine line of, I do believe sticking with something that even if it gets hard, if you're in your heart, know that this is what you want to do, because I've been there many times with Creative Mornings, but in my heart, this is my labor of love of my lifetime is Creative Mornings. And I will always find a way to push through. But there's also moments where it's actually really beneficial to just admit that it's maybe time to let something go.
Yeah, I totally agree. When it's time, your body tells you.
But then, can I please also tell the youngsters on this podcast, because I have young teenagers, anything really worthwhile is on the other end of really sticking with something. So this might be contradictory to what I just said. But if I look at all the things I'm so proud of right now, my blog, I've been running it for 19 years. Creative Mornings is 16 years. Tatley is 12, I think 13. I mean, I sold it 2 years ago, but it's still going. So there's this fine balance of just sticking with something. If you're really still excited about it, don't give up. Yeah. Don't give up so quickly.
Yeah. My last question for every guest is, what is your one word that's guiding you, one word that's inspirational to you this year or always?
I think to me, it comes down to generosity. That's always been the word that has been guiding me. Thoughtfulness and generosity. Those two combined have been my very trusted guides throughout my life. It's never not paid off to be generous or thoughtful.
And you live that every day. Thank you so much. This was so much fun. I could talk to you for another few hours.
Thank you, Teresa. This was so lovely.
Thanks again to my friend, Tina Roth Eisenberg, for spending time with us today. Just talking with her makes me feel so energized and optimistic about the creative community and my fellow humans in general. Here are a bunch of my key takeaways from our conversation. 1, surrounding yourself with other creatives not only combats loneliness, but also sparks inspiration and helpful impromptu brainstorming sessions. Tina, for example, founded 3 companies based on conversations with friends in her very first co-working space during the lunch hour. 2, nothing worthwhile comes out perfectly the first time. Creative Mornings didn't feel quite right when it first started, but Tina kept tweaking it. Whatever your project is, keep iterating and making improvements. 3, if something in your creative work scares you, make it less scary by calling it an experiment. That way, no matter the outcome, you've succeeded because you've learned whether the idea works or not. 4, building a community requires commitment. Rather than worrying about the time and effort it takes to connect with others, focus on the rewards that come from those connections. And 5, people do want to connect. Tina's neighborhood coffee shop proves that inviting people works. Just make it a light lift, call it an experiment, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. I'm sure of it. Thanks for listening to In the Making, brought to you by Adobe Express, the all-in-one content creation app included in your Creative Cloud membership. If you like this episode, be sure to leave us a rating and a review and subscribe in your favorite podcast app. I'm Teresa Au, and I'll see you next time.